Welcome to the SMIRK Podcast. Welcome to the SMIRK Podcast. My name is Dylan Trainer, and I am on a mission to track down and sit down with some amazing and inspiring people. We talk about their journey through life, gather some information and tips on living a happier and healthier lifestyle, which is what it's all about at the end of the day. Looking after our heads, looking after our mental health, so that we can enjoy life and focus on the things that matter. On today's episode, I'm sitting down with the absolute legend that is Scott Gooding. By all accounts of the word, Scott is an expert in the field of nutrition. Having gone through his own personal journey, Scott has went on to publish 9 books in the area of diet, nutrition and clean living. I believe he's working on number 10 at the minute. He also has an online health program and coaches people to live a happier and healthier lifestyle using a holistic approach on life. It was amazing to sit down with him and talk all things nutrition and health. I had a great time. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. Scott Gooding, thanks a million for inviting me up to the house.
Oh, my pleasure, Dylan, my pleasure.
Letting some random Irish stranger into the home.
Yeah.
It's very nice, yeah. We're just a stone's throw away from Summer Bay.
True, very true, yeah.
Palm Beach. I don't know if you know how important home and away is in Irish culture.
Really?
Regimental was Simpsons at 6 o'clock, home and away at 6:30.
Yeah, right.
We'd never miss it.
Yeah, it's been running a long time. I remember watching it because I'm from the UK originally.
Yeah.
It would have been about the same slot. You know, buddy, I've been here 22 years or thereabouts. So yeah, I don't know how long it's been running. 25 years, 30 years, I don't know.
Yeah, well, when I was a kid, when you got in from school, it was Simpsons and home and away. That was all you cared about in the evening. Right. So I almost feel like all the cameras set up here. I almost feel like we're in an episode. I feel like Alf Stewart's going to walk around the corner now any minute.
He might. He might.
So you've dedicated your life to. Well, now I don't want to put words in your mouth, but from the outside looking in, it looks like you've kind of dedicated your life into learning about how to live a healthier lifestyle through nutrition and all those kind of things, and then you've kind of made it your mission to share all that information with other people through all the books and everything that you've written. So where did the journey start for you? Where was the?
Yeah, I guess I have made it my mission. And I'll explain the crux of that, or the impetus, or what gave me the fire. Because you can't just, for someone to have a mission, I think it requires, like, there has to be either a moment or a catastrophe, or you experience, something, maybe not yourself, but you experience a friend or a loved one has gone through something, and that gives the spark. So there has to be a spark. And so that for me happened in 2005. We've got plenty of time on this podcast.
Yeah. Oh, so, bring it way back, as far as you want.
Well, I was born in 1975. So in 2000, so just to give it context, predating 2005, I was heavily involved in fitness. So all through my childhood, all through schooling, every team sport, every individual sport, I took part in, loved. I was the sporty kid.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to, do pretty well in one team sport and one individual pursuit. And then sort of going into my, late adolescence, early 20s, I sort of narrowed down where I wanted to put my energy, and it was predominantly 1 or 2 team sports, and so it went from being, as a kid, it was very much a social thing, being part of playing sport, to more into my late adolescence, early 20s, into more performance, and how do I optimize my performance, how do I win, basically. And so if you didn't know me personally, you probably would have seen me running around the streets in my local, I was living in Bondi back then. And so that was really my persona, that was my identity. I was the fit guy, or the fitness guy. I wanted to say the fit guy, but and then...
Are you trying to say like you were turning heads on the beach when you were running past, is it? All the women were looking at you, is that the...
Oh, probably because my head was so bright red and, why is he running in 35 degree heat? And then in 2005, September 2005, I was working with this guy and doing repetitive movement over a number of days, and then one moment I just heard this pop and something gave in my back. And I'd never really certainly never had a back injury. I'd never really had a serious injury of any nature. And I knew that, and I tried to keep working, and I knew that it wasn't going to get better in the next sort of 5-10 minutes, but I thought I'll go home. I think it was a Thursday or a Friday afternoon, so I thought, well, I'll just have the weekend off. By Monday, I'll be right as rain.
Yeah.
So that weekend I pretty much spent laid out on the floor, and the pain didn't recede come Monday, so I couldn't go to work. And then that few days turned into a couple of weeks, and I remember going to see she wasn't a physio, she was a chiro. I just looked, this sort of before the proliferation of the availability of Google, I guess, because I ended up looking in the white pages, and I was like, right, there's my most local chiro. Got a back injury, so that makes sense, right? You go and see a chiro. So I went to see this lady, and I was on the bench, and I said, oh, when do you think I'll be able to run again? She went, oh, you'll never be able to run again. And that, to me, at that moment in my life, was the most, for her, it was such this flippant throwaway line. To me, it was like, you've just completely pulled the rug from under my feet. Like, you've just totally disabled me.
Right.
In so many, I was already disabled in some regards, in some capacity, but mentally, spiritually, emotionally, she just... anyway, it went on for weeks, months, and it eventually turned into years. And I was never able to get on top of the injury to the point where I could be anywhere where any semblance of where I was before. And so my physical health wasn't where it should have been or where I wanted it to be, and so naturally my mental health declined.
Yeah.
And so how that manifests is that being in constant pain, it's very hard, I would say almost impossible, unless you're a Buddhist monk or something of that nature, to be present, to be genuinely present, to look someone in the eye and hear what they're saying when you're contending with pain all the time. Like, it's very hard. So I'm an introvert by nature, but I just really withdrew. I was a pretty grumpy, I don't want to swear on your podcast, but,
Lauren, you're all right. You can say what you want.
I was a pretty grumpy motherfucker for, many a year within that it ended up being 7 years.
Bloody hell. And what was the injury? Was it?
It was discs.
Right.
So 3 sort of discs going from S1, L5, and then 2 above.
Right.
So that first one had ruptured more significantly than the others. So anyway, I was a shell of the man I once was, and so my identity had to change. My mood was dysregulated. I was, why has it happened to me? I'm the fitness guy. Like, why this is so undeserved? I don't deserve this. Like, so all that dialogue, and then you still got to live life. Like, you still got to work. You still got to. And then in the 8th year, and we're getting to the point of this story, but in the 8th year, I started to. Well, all that time spent the 7 years I was trying to fix myself in a mechanical sense. I've got an exercise science background, so to me, you know, I could put my injury, I could put my spine up on you know, an X-ray or MRI, and you could see you can see pathology there. You can see the bulging disc and pressure on nerves, and so to me, to remedy that would take a mechanical response, intervention, massage, stretching, acupuncture, you know, all the sort of staple interventions that you pursue if you have a back injury. But it didn't really get me anywhere. Like, I'd have like small glimpses of periods in that 7-year time frame where, you know, it was a bit more mobile than it was, but, you know, it would be a day or two or a week maybe.
Yeah.
So I certainly couldn't get on top of it. And then in the 8th year I started to read about foods that were pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory, and at that point I really had nothing to lose. So I systematically started to eliminate foods that were pro-inflammatory and embrace and eat more of the foods that were anti-inflammatory. And I became quite dogmatic about it. I became quite militant about it.
Yeah.
Because not over days, probably not weeks, but months, I could see this shift. And then within about a year, I was doing more in terms of movement and being pain-free than I had for the last 7 years. And so I could see this change, this arc was appearing, and I was heading in a positive direction. So fast forward 18 months, I was doing again more than I could in the last, you know. And so to me, the penny dropped, and it dropped very loudly, and it told me that food and nutrition can be therapeutic and medicinal, because I was the case study. I'm sure it's not a controlled clinical trial, it's N equals 1 in this case. But it was a powerful message.
Yeah, but that's how you learn.
Yeah.
You know, you can. I find that for myself is I've studied as an engineer, so when it comes to engineering, I have a qualification. But when it comes to talking about mental health and stuff like that, I don't have a qualification. So I almost feel like I shouldn't have the voice that I have, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right.
Because I'm not qualified in it, and I shouldn't be making videos about how to look after your mental health, because, you know, I've got my own personal experience coming through it. So like you're saying there, where it's just your experience going through it.
Yeah.
And that's such a valuable thing.
Yeah. Well, it's the one thing, you know, back to your question, it was the one thing that gave me, you know, clear as day. It was like, this is my experience and it's worked. It's not that my diet was terrible. I've always tried to live a healthy diet, kind of with the information I had at the time. So it's not like I was, you know, glugging cans of Coke and eating KFC every mealtime. But I can look back and there was definitely potholes in my diet. And I was probably, one of the reasons I probably got injured, I wasn't refueling enough and overtraining. So there's a few different mechanisms to why I got injured. But it definitely sent a loud message that food is medicinal and therapeutic. And, you know, that was in 2013 or thereabouts. And so, you know, I've just built and built and built. And now I'm so far away from, touch wood, that time in my life that I was a victim of back pain, that I no longer, you know, I don't associate myself with being a victim. So it was without a doubt the hardest period of my life, but has actually been the most transformative and positive in my life. Yeah. Because it's given me direction, it's given me purpose, and a life with purpose is a life well spent. So I'm one of those probably annoying people that loves what they do. You know, all those sort of cliches around doing what you love, and it's true. Like I do. I feel blessed and privileged to help people in some small or large way through nutrition and exercise and stress management. I'm very, very grateful for that experience.
Yeah.
Because without it, I don't know. I might be in this field, but there's not that anchor, I guess. There's not that the fire in your belly because you've experienced something firsthand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how was your research? Was it through books and through?
Yeah, it wasn't podcast like it would be now, because this was like in 2012, 2013. It was books, listening to people that I respected. It was sort of the paleo movement was in its sort of embryonic phase back then. So there was people like Mark Sisson and predominantly people overseas in the States.
Right.
So you just start to like hear things.
You were getting the whispers over here.
Getting the whispers over here, yeah, about inflammation.
Yeah.
And again, Dylan, this is N equals 1. So the way, for full disclosure, this isn't I didn't go through clinical controlled trials, so it's not. There might have been something else at play, right? But I know that I had a pretty severe debilitating back injury for 7 years. And I tried so many different things. And then in the 8th year, I looked at my diet and I started to edit my diet. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, the shift was there. So I forget where I was going with that, but I forget where I was going with that.
That's all right. So what, the Paleo Diet, for anyone listening and me who don't know exactly what that is, what's kind of the backbone of that?
Yeah, the backbone is, in a nutshell, and that's a contentious thing to say, some irony around that when you're talking about the Paleo Diet, the nutshell, but in a nutshell, it's an adherence to natural foods.
Right.
So an adherence to natural foods by virtue is a restriction or abolition of synthetic, processed, and refined foods.
Okay. So if it comes out of the ground, or if it's walking on 4 legs, you can eat it.
That's right. So Paleo Paleolithic. So it's going back to our sort of hunter-gatherer roots.
Yeah.
So beyond, the sort of premise is that anything beyond 10,000 years. So 10,000 years is sort of the line in the sand where there was the agricultural revolution, and with that became, massive shift in culture and society, because it enabled us to grow our own food in one spot. Food, we could grow food to have surpluses, so there wasn't a need or want or a necessity to go and hunt and gather. And so our tribes, which sort of probably topped out at 300 or thereabouts, became large villages, small towns, cities, and then social hierarchies started, and you got the feudal system. And but basically the diet is reminiscent of what our hunter-gatherers would have eaten. So lots of meat, fatty meats, organ meat, and then berries and fruit that are very seasonal. Yeah. So it's sort of, it was put up on a pedestal in terms of a really progressive diet. I mean, really, it's a diet that it's probably the oldest diet.
Although, but it's marketed as this new thing.
And it's had its. What's happened is that, which is what happens with most diets, is that the pure version of it, whether it's paleo or primal or keto, is pretty good. it's when we as a modern species takes the essence of it and manipulates it in a way that does incorporate some of the modern day processed foods. Like we just bend it a little bit to make it suit our own indulgences and desires.
Yeah.
And when
Make it a little bit easier for ourselves.
make it a little bit easier, but then are you moving the needle particularly? Like the part of the paleo diet was this emergence of paleo treats, right? So you and I know that a Snickers bar isn't particularly healthy for us. You know, it's a nice little treat once in a while, but we know that that bar doesn't deliver us health.
Yeah.
Through the paleo diet, there's emergence of paleo treats. And so they've been sweetened by honey or agave or maple syrup, things that you would find in nature.
Yeah.
Still has the same impact on a physiological level that the Snickers does. But now we think we could probably eat these till the cows come home because they're in the health food store and they've got paleo attached to them, and so kind of lets us off the hook a little bit. So I don't think that's not a positive that comes out of it. That's us like bending the rules to suit us a little bit.
Yeah.
So was the whole idea of you taking on the paleo diet, was that just to see how it would impact the inflammation?
Yeah, I guess the on-ramp was hearing the conversation about inflammation, and then the notion of the paleo diet. Lauren Cordain is the guy that struck a chord with me. So he's sort of the godfather of paleo diet, and Marxist on to a lesser extent, I guess. So yeah, it was a bit of trial and error, and you know, you can put these sort of food groups into, or you can put certain foods into food groups, and then label those inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. And once you do that, you can really simplify your health. So you go, well, processed foods as a whole is pro-inflammatory. And
that's because of what we're putting in it, preservative wise and stuff like that, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be unnatural. It can be. So there's food groups such as grains, and there's compounds in grains, there's compounds in legumes and lentils and things of that nature that don't ultimately promote 100% health.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that lentil or that grain is inherently malevolent. There are elements to that promote health, but there's compounds within them that don't. But because paleo is so dogmatic, it's like, well, you can't have any nuts, you can't have any you can't have any peanuts, you can't have any grains, you can't have any legumes. And so it becomes very, the parameters are very defined.
Right.
Which worked for me at that time, because I was like, well, I want to do this, and I want to do it well, because I want to. I'm starting. Yeah, I'm all in. Both feet are in, because I started to see results.
Yeah.
I started to get me back, my identity, and my. I started to enjoy life again and smile and laugh. So I was like, well, if this is working, then fuck grains and fuck peanuts, and I'm not going to have those in my life. If that's all it takes, it's a no-brainer. I think for most people that will work for a period of time, but once you install these sort of very firm lines around what's in and what's out, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure, I think. There needs to be an acceptance of, there needs to be an acceptance that there are really no good food and bad food. I think once you frame it like that, it's a bit dangerous. Because the way we are made is that if we frame it good food, bad food, the moment we indulge in a bad food, we kind of feel like we've undone any of the good that we've done, and fuck it, you throw your hands up and this diet thing's too hard. And
Yeah.
so there needs to be, you know, not, the parameters need to be not so high and firm and rigid, which is where the Primal Diet, so the Primal Diet came in after the Paleo Diet, which allowed for some wiggle room. So it allowed for a little bit of dairy, it allowed for a little bit of grain, it allowed for some peanuts. It wasn't as dogmatic, and I think that's probably why maybe people still talk about the primal and not necessarily about the paleo.
Right.
Yeah.
So it kind of shifted your whole mindset towards food, going through that whole thing.
Yeah, and it's still, you know, that was close to 10 years ago. I think it's still changing.
Yeah.
Not with the same magnitude. So that was quite an upheaval, a real sort of unpacking of what constitutes my diet back then. Now, you know, 10 years later, it's more of a fine tune. But I think, you know, we've all got to continue to have our ears open and eyes open in all fields, like not just our own health, but, you know, there's so much to learn. And actually, the older I get, as cliched as it is, the more I realise I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and that's come up around COVID, you know, like when COVID first was spoken of, and then the vaccine. I don't want to get into a vaccine conversation here with you, but, you know, I had firm, like, staunch kind of opinions of it. But then you go, I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not a virologist, I'm not a doctor, I haven't had it. I actually don't know anything.
Yeah.
And so once you let go of, you know, I'm not married to those opinions, you kind of gives you a bit of freedom.
Yeah. It's been a, I don't really want to get into it either now, but yeah, it's been a mad one to see how people are so tied to, you know, the ideologies from both sides, and they're willing to argue about it. And it's like, you know, I'm like that. I don't know anything about it, you know, and my perception about it has changed going through it.
Yeah.
And it does. It's good because I think it's your ego is attached to these kind of ideologies. But yeah, it's been a funny one to see how people react to it and how.
Well, I mean, I can't see how the lay person, being me, can have an informed opinion on it when you see people in the same industry that have lots of letters after their names, like they're well respected, can't seem to agree.
Yeah.
So people at that level don't, and that's because they're dealing with something that's quite novel, right? In terms of its strain, in terms of its of the effect that it's having on the globe. They don't 100% agree, and they're like, you know, in terms of like intellect, stratosphere compared to me. So why should I have like really informed opinions on it? It's staggering, and it's been quite. I know we're sort of going off subject at the moment, but
it's all good.
It's been quite fascinating to watch, to tell you the truth.
It has.
I have deliberately not. You know, I'm not. You know, on social media, I'm not political or make any social commentary. I'm quite private in many ways, but it's been pretty interesting to watch, like everyone, you know, attached, as you say, like through ego, attached to a certain ideology, and then willing to go, you know, head to head with anyone that.
Yeah.
But there's no grading of opinion. Like if you don't agree with me, it means you're right at the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
But life's not like that.
Yeah.
Like there's a huge gradient between
Yeah.
two people's viewpoints. It's not black and white.
Yeah, you're jumping.
I mean, it can be black and white.
Yeah.
But most people would fit in somewhere in between.
Yeah, it's like you're jumping on either team, and then that's it. You're having it out with the other side.
Yeah.
which is, it's a bit of a weird one, especially when none of us know. I don't think anyone knows what's going on.
No, I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah, I've buried my head in the sand with it. I haven't watched the news. I haven't looked at the numbers. I've just been like, look, there's smarter people working on this. When they figure it out, they're going to let us know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. You know. Yeah.
Just going back, like touching on mental health, you have a certain amount of bandwidth to how much room you have for stuff in your brain, thoughts wise and stuff like that. And for me, I've spent a lot of time the last few years trying to figure out how to keep myself in a good mental state, and letting stuff like that come into your your mindset and stuff, and the argumentative nature that comes along with it. It's like it just takes up so much space in your brain.
Totally.
So I made the conscious decision to just be like, I just don't want this. I don't want this information taking up the parts of my brain that could be better spent thinking about other things.
So what that requires is awareness, right?
Yes.
So you've intercepted a pattern of behaviour, albeit sitting on your phone, scrolling through, which is a fairly evolved kind of decision to make, to have that awareness and then choose to make a different decision, i.e. put my phone down or unfollow people. So much of this stuff is unconscious, I think, for people. Before they know it, they're down the rabbit hole in either direction. Yeah. I'm not, I don't want to splice that into the different categories, but I 100% agree. Like we do have a certain bandwidth and capacity to contend with life and all that life throws at us. And life's hard enough anyway outside of COVID. So if you've any degree of fragility or instability,
which I do.
Yeah, right. Well, that's a courageous and wise decision to go. I don't want to layer in another thing that causes me anxiety and stress, so I'm going to choose not to. Because if you go down these rabbit holes, whichever direction, pro or anti, ultimately, how does it serve you, right? Unless you're protesting in either direction, pro or anti, and you're knocking on ministers' doors and people who are making decisions around public health, and unless you're being super active about it, what is scrolling on your
what's the point?
actually gonna do? Fuck all. Sorry, I keep swearing on your
podcast,
right. But
go for it.
That is the truth, and the only thing it will serve you is driving fear, driving differences amongst us, driving anxiety. It's not going to be a positive outcome.
Yeah, and that's like we won't stay on this topic for too long, because I know everyone's probably sick of hearing about it.
Yeah.
But from the standpoint in the news and the language that was used and the way it was conveyed, it was just so negative and so provoking those fear-mongering kind of emotions and all that kind of stuff. Whereas, personally, I feel like it should have been. But that's what sells, I suppose. That's the media. That's what gets the attention. Is pulling on people to get them agitated and get them.
So back to your point about when you got home from school and it was The Simpsons and Home and Away. It was also a little bit later on, like the 9 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock news. And there was, I don't know, it was the same in Ireland, but there was, when I was growing up, there was 3 stations, and then there became 4, and then when I left the UK, there was 5. So it's almost like it's the news station has a captive audience. Now, 25 years later, there's news in social media, there's digital news, there's, you know, you can Google anything, there's things on YouTube, there's Fox, there's CNN, there's Al Jazeera, there's BBC. And so they then are in this marketplace where they have to be more competitive.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And so they're putting up sensationalized news headlines and
clickbait. Yeah. It'd drive you mad.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah. I've made peace with it. That's the way it's
Good.
going to be, and just ignore it.
In a year or two, it'll be, I think, and again, I'm not married to this opinion, but it'll be, we won't be in the midst of it, you know, like in all regards. We will be learning to live with it, and it won't be the first news story every time. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's been a mad few years.
It has.
2 years. But just to get back to nutrition and that side of things, what it'd be like if you could give me just an example of a daily, kind of a daily, say paleo, if you're on the paleo diet, what would be kind of your daily meals?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess I don't really. I've learned over the years to not attach a name to a. So I have written books about the paleo diet, and I have written books about the keto diet.
Yeah.
But I also, and you know that sells books, right? To put, you know, my last book I wanted it to be about inflammation. My publisher was like, well, that's not going to sell. You need that diet.
Yeah.
So it's, but when I speak to my clients, there's no label attached to what I'm prescribing. So it's not you're following a diet. It's just
healthy.
Yeah, it's. I guess it goes back to how I was describing the paleo diet. Is if you could do one thing, it would be eat more natural foods.
Yeah. And
by virtue of that, you know, if you've got X bandwidth for nutrition or calories for the day, and if most of those calories are coming from natural and unprocessed, it means by virtue of that, there's not much for unprocessed. So it's not to say that you can't eat those foods.
Yeah.
But if predominantly you're eating natural and unprocessed, your streak's ahead. Like that's even before you get into like fasting and feeding windows and counting calories and macronutrients. If you just do that one thing, eat more natural foods, then you're ahead of the curve. So what do I have? I might start my day with the leftovers from the night before, which might sound a bit weird for...
No, I'm a big fan of that too.
Yeah. How it tastes like 20% better than it did the night before.
Yeah, that time in the fridge just gets the flavours going.
So that could be a beef stew, it could be chicken that's left over from a roast, could be a curry, and I might breakfastize it with adding an egg or something. You know, that breakfast, first of all, breakfast, lunch and dinner is a social construct. So if you don't feel like eating breakfast, like if you naturally don't feel like eating breakfast and you're sort of forcing it down because you've heard that it's the most important meal of the day, you can kind of rid yourself of that. Just eat when you're, I mean, it's hard because most of us are 9 to 5, so you feel like you want to work, eat before you go to work, and then you've got half an hour in the middle of the day, so that's your lunch. But also the construct
I'm a little bit annoyed that you said that.
Why?
Because I've been trying to convince my girlfriend that she doesn't eat breakfast.
Right.
So I've been trying to convince her that she needs to get something in the morning. And if she's going to be listening to this, she's just going to hit me with the, I told you.
Yeah, you were right. Listen to your gut instinct. Don't listen to Dylan. Well, ironically, and it's kind of sounds counterintuitive, but you could argue one of the most potent things she could do for her biological health, if we're talking about your partner, is not eat breakfast.
Just listen to the body.
Well, what you're doing there is you're extending the fast. So breakfast is breaking the fast that you've inherited from the night's sleep. So she might have a dinner. Sorry to bring this direct to your girlfriend, but let's say she finishes dinner at 7. She's having breakfast at 7. She's had a 12-hour fast. If she then skips breakfast, which is what her sounds like she's more naturally inclined to do, but she's getting pressure from her boyfriend, and she moves that 7 to midday or early lunch when she starts to feel hungry, then she's gone from a 12-hour fasting window to a 17-hour with just like a small edit. And that is probably, ironically, I feel like there's some irony in there, because we're always looking for foods that really enhance health and amplify health and superfoods, but it's actually going without food is probably probably one of the biggest tools that we have to amplify our biological health.
Yeah.
So that's
interesting.
That's why I guess there's this, the field of nutrition is constantly evolving, and there's lots of leaders in that field and people that are innovating and researching. And what's coming to the surface is this notion around feeding windows versus fasting windows. And so there's magic and gold to be had from fasting.
Yeah.
Equally, there's magic and gold to be had from truncating your feeding window. So there's, on both sides of the coin, there's pluses to be had.
Yeah.
So one of the first things I'll ask my clients is when I speak to them, it's not like, tell me about your typical day on a plate, or how often do you exercise. It's like, when do you start eating and when do you finish eating? So what's your feeding window? And some clients come to me and they don't know why I'm asking, so they're normally quite honest, which is a good thing.
I'm paying for this fella and he's asking me this.
And they might have, I've worked with clients that have got 16, 17, 18 hours feeding window, because they start on the way to work, or when they first get up at 6, and then they finish work, and then they chat with the partner, and then they cook, and then they might go to the fridge for another bite, sort of 9 or 10 o'clock, and you're really working against your circadian rhythm at that point, because your circadian, your biological clock is really geared for you to be optimized and primed from a digestive point of view for about 8 to 10 hours. So then if you're demanding of your digestion beyond that, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, what happens is that your the productivity, if you like, of your digestive enzymes drops off the edge of the cliff at that 10-hour mark. So it's not like it tapers off gently, it drops off quite radically. And if you're eating in that time period beyond at 10 hours, long term you're setting yourself up for metabolic disorder. So the best thing you can do, one of the best things you can do, again, before you're looking at your macros and your calories, and is just looking at your timing of your food.
Right.
When to eat and when not to eat.
That is very interesting.
So your partner was right.
She's smart. She's smarter than I've given her credit for.
You're a brave man. But equally, it's got to work for you. So if flip that on its head, and she wants to eat breakfast, and you're saying, don't eat breakfast, and she wants to eat breakfast because she's hungry, like she wakes up and she's hungry, then you just work to that. So you go, okay, there are some people that wake up and they're ravenous. Equally, there's some people that wake up and it's almost like force feeding. So if you are one of those people that wakes up and they're ravenous, then eat. But maybe you taper you truncate your feeding window from editing at the other end of the day, or you miss lunch, or any way that you can sort of go from a 15, 16, 17 hour window to a slightly shorter one will help your metabolic health long term.
Right, that is very interesting. I wasn't, that's the last thing I would have thought at. You know, normally when it comes to diets and stuff, you're thinking about what you're putting into your body, not the time period.
Yeah, I mean that's all. It all has validity, but if you can layer these things, so you're talking about timing, you're talking about quality.
Yeah.
So that's processed versus unprocessed.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about quantity. And if you manipulate the two and get those first two right, then it can kind of take care of the third being quantity. But collectively, that's the optic that you should be looking at your nutrition through: timing, quality, and quantity.
Right.
So we are, we're sitting here. We've got microphones and cameras. So and you drove here.
Very professional setup.
Oh, it's a very professional setup. So we're very advanced as a species, right? We're very sophisticated, but we're very primal in our physiology and our biology. So, that thing that we're sheltering from, the sun, dictates much of our biological rhythm. So it will inform us when it comes over the horizon through receptors in our eyes that the sun is up and sets a rhythm in terms of the types of hormones that get flushed through our system. And so during the day we should be alert, primed, elevated heartbeat, elevated blood pressure, because we're hunter-gatherers, right? So we need to be ready. As it dips below that horizon, it informs us that there's no more blue light hitting our receptors, and so there should be a down regulation of those hormones that have occupied us through the day, and then we'll segue into restfulness and sleep. So how does that affect our digestion? Is that we're primed and optimized during the day, and so that's when we have a shorter feeding window. We're not by nature designed to be eating 17, 18 hours of the day. So it's about, if you had to boil it down, it's about keying into our circadian rhythm, our biological clock, which, despite our level of sophistication, is governed by that big ball of nuclear fission in the. So what happens is that the sun comes up, and that's one cue, that's one trigger, if you like, that informs our biology of one thing: the sun is up and we should be primed and optimized. The other thing is the first time we eat is the second trigger, the second external cue. So that almost sets like a countdown timer on your digestive enzymes, and so they are optimized from then on in for about 8 to 10 hours. So if you, so that's it in a nutshell. That it's and I think that this will be the next sort of movement, if you like, this sort of powered by the sun almost. That the closer that we can come to our natural rhythm, the better we all are in terms of our biological health, and then of course our longevity. The thing that interrupts that is looking at blue light through our phones and our computers and our laptops and our, so that extends. So the sun will dip there about 7 o'clock or 6:30. If I then watch my phone for another hour, it's telling me that the sun's up for another hour. And so it just stalls that restfulness and sleep component of my day. And then if I have a drink or I take drugs or I have coffee too late, they were all disrupting that the hormonal infrastructure of the day. And so,
and that'll come to have a negative impact on how you're feeling and everything.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you and I have both had a poor night's sleep, and so we both know how that makes us feel the next day. You're a bit more irritable, you're a bit more, there's a higher proclivity to eat sugar and carbs, less patience, less perky. If you are chronically compromising your sleep and chronically in a sleep debt, it's like you're having a heavy blanket over you. Like, cracks will appear. So I'm probably jumping all over the place, but I mean, it all overlaps one another. You can't be talking about being powered by the sun and not talk about sleep. It's all this, the infrastructure of your hormones and the natural order of the day and the natural biological rhythm. But going back to what's important about nutrition is timing, but also what's important about general health and being is sleep.
Yeah.
And so that's often a question I'll ask even before nutrition is like, how's your sleep?
Yeah.
It's something that we do every day. It's something that we all enjoy, unless you're having night tremors or nightmares. It's free. It's fucking delicious. Like, focus on that before you get a gym membership.
Yeah. So what kind of tips would you have for your clients about kind of sleep and improving the sleep and stuff?
Well, have in the back of your mind that ideally the research sort of shows that we need between 7 and 8, 7 and 9 maybe. So anything less than that is suboptimal, anything more than that is suboptimal. So that 7 to 8, 7 to 9 is the sweet spot. So if you're not getting that, look at how you can improve that by, coffee would be a good thing to look at. Not saying don't drink coffee, but look at the timing of the coffee, or the caffeine. So caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours, 5 to 6 hours. So if you're having a coffee at 12 noon, you've got half the amount of caffeine in your system at 6 p.m.
Right.
And so you're not, and then a quarter of the amount of caffeine at midnight.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a case of editing that slightly, creating a cool environment, which is hard in Australia, but ideally about 17 to 19 degrees. Is it super dark in your bedroom? Do you need to wear earplugs? All like little things, but a huge thing would be, we all have phones, we all have tablets, we all watch Netflix. So that in itself means that we stay up later than we would ordinarily because we're stimulated. Even before you talk about the blue light, we're watching whatever it is and it's entertaining, right? It's either funny or dramatic or scary, so we're stimulated.
Yeah.
So replace that screen with a book and I reckon you'd be nodding off earlier than you would be. So straight away we're compromising the timing or the duration of your sleep. But saddle that up with the fact that blue light or that screen is emitting blue light, which is hitting our melanopsin receptors and telling us that the sun is still up. So, melatonin shouldn't be released yet, which is our sleep hormone. So it's about, I'm not saying don't watch screens because that's not probably sustainable, but it might mean that, okay, I'm just going to go to bed. I'm going to turn my screen off 20 minutes earlier for the next month.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, another 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Beyond that, another 20 minutes. And so within a number of months, you've clawed back an hour, but it doesn't feel like you've radicalized your evening.
Yeah.
And then I guess it would be do that until you're sustainably or consistently hitting about 7 to 8 hours. And then we could talk about the sleep efficiency. So, are you getting up often in the night? If you are, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like if you need to pee a couple of times, that's all cool. Like we do wake up a number of times throughout the course of the night, but it's when you're struggling to fall back asleep, anywhere beyond sort of 20 minutes, then your sleep efficiency is being compromised. So you might be going to bed at the right time and getting up at the right time to fit into that 7 to 8 hours. But in the midst of that sleep, it's not harmonious, if you like. So are you anxious? Are you worried? Are you stressed? Are you running through your to-do list? So there's tools that you can do before you go to bed to kind of help dump that. A worry journal helps you dump that, or verbalizing things or writing things down that you got to do the next day. So you're not at 3 a.m. going, oh, I've got that meeting, I've got to remember to do that, because you can't act on it at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
It's your mind playing silly buggers. Like you can't, it's redundant, like you're just worrying for the sake of worrying. And so dumping that at the start of the night before you go to sleep might help you. And then there's
a bit of journaling or something before bed, and just get everything out of your head.
Yeah, like a worry dump. Like if worry and stress is waking you up, write those things down, and it might just help. Or tell your partner. I think all that sort of stuff, as simple as it sounds, does work.
Yeah, gets it out of your head a bit.
Gets it out of your head, yeah. And then there's supplements that help you segue into sleep. Hot, cold showers, exercise.
Yeah.
There's lots of strategies you can increase your sleep.
Yeah, there's a lot in it.
Yeah.
We are bouncing from topic to topic here.
No, sorry.
Oh no, it's all right.
I've had too much coffee.
That's just the way these podcasts always go. So we were kind of talking about the healthy kind of diet.
Yeah.
And you were kind of going through what you'd have during the day. I suppose what are the main things you'd kind of tell people to cut out, or like in the kind of normal diet of today?
Yeah.
What would be the main things you tell people to watch out for and kind of stay clear of a bit and stuff like that?
Probably no surprise to anyone, it'd be sugar.
Yeah.
And understanding the different guises that sugar has. So what might be quite useful to know is that sugar triggers a very primal mechanism that historically, going back to our hunter-gatherers and beyond, served us very well. And that system's the dopamine system, right? So it's the system set up for anticipation, reward, motivation. It curates our mental state. So you and I sitting here, we'd be getting pumps of dopamine, particularly before we started rolling. That anticipation, a bit, the nerves, that's dopamine and all its biological cousins, adrenaline and cortisol. So what sugar does on ingestion, it triggers that loop. So neurons in our gut, and remind me to say about all the guises of sugar too. So let's say we eat a Tim Tam, right? Neurons in our gut identify the sugar in the Tim Tam and send a direct message up the vagus nerve into our brain and triggers dopamine. And you go, oh, that was good. Makes you feel good, right? And then very shortly after, if not, there's an overlap of pleasure and pain. And the pain isn't felt like a stubbed toe or a headache or anything of that nature. It's the feeling of missing out. It's the feeling of craving. And so we circle back around and we want more of the thing that brought us the pleasure. In isolation, it's not a malevolent force. It's not a bad thing. So if I went upstairs and had a Tim Tam and then didn't eat another Tim Tam for the next year, nothing. Yeah. It has no consequence. If I was to eat that Tim Tam, 10 minutes later have another Tim Tam, and then have another couple tonight, then what I do, there no longer becomes this sort of equal measure of pleasure and pain. There's actually an unequal measure in the sense that pain becomes amplified. And so the pain and the craving exceeds the pleasure that you experience from that Tim Tam. And so you're in this sort of negative loop, which is the backbone for addiction. So in essence, what I'm saying is that sugar has this pernicious effect and it's ubiquitous in society, and it's triggering this mechanism that's largely out of our control. addiction of any nature is somewhat subconscious, because you're triggering this age-old mechanism that, in terms of sugar's effect on it, has served us well, because our primal ancestors would have come across fruit or honey very infrequent, and it's designed for us to gorge in that moment and fatten us up for winter. But winter never comes, right?
Yeah.
Not in 2021.
The fridge is always turned on.
Fridge is always turned on. There's always food in supermarket aisles. Like we don't have those really strong seasons anymore. And so Tim Tam is a very obvious form of sugar, and we can all acknowledge that it's a confectionery item. But the same neurons find sugar in the base of a pizza, in bread, in pasta, in rice, in Snickers, in all those guises that it comes in. And it's nothing to do with the sensation or the taste of these foods, because research has shown that if you remove that element, i.e. food enters through the gut or the throat, the same thing happens. The neurons pick it up in here, send a message, trigger dopamine, and send that loop spinning.
Yeah.
So it's not about, I love the taste of sugar, bring me more. There's this subversive mechanism it's almost, your hands are off the wheel.
Yeah.
What's driving it is this system that's primal in nature, it's deep-seated stuff.
Yeah.
And so people fall into all manner of addictions because of it.
Yeah.
Sex, coke, pornography, and chocolate and sugar is one of them. And the only way to quieten down that system and redress that seesaw, redress that balance of pleasure and pain, is to forego that pleasure for a period of time.
Yeah.
Abstinence.
So you're trying
which is hard.
Yeah, you're trying to break the cycle of it.
Yeah, it's just breaking habits.
Yeah.
Which when you throw in that the pain and the craving, makes it hard. That's why people can't kick certain addictions. It's not because they're. And here's the thing that we should all know: if you do have a propensity for sugar, or there's a thing that you can't go without, whether that's a chocolate bar or a cake or ice cream at the end of the day, or pasta, or all those foods of that nature, and you've tried and tried and tried and you can't give it up, it's not because you're lazy or you lack willpower or any negative label like that. It's because of this deep-seated primal mechanism that's fucking tripping you up every time.
So it's almost subconscious. It's not even at the conscious level where you're
Totally.
thinking. You're not saying to yourself, "Oh, I'd love a Tim Tam now."
No, that's
It's
right.
your body is saying, "Hey, you
your
need to
hands
get
are
that.
off,
You need
your
to get
hands
that
are off
into
the
you."
wheel. There's a with dopamine. There's a sensory and a motor response, right? So the motor response is fascinating. There will be a leaning in towards the thing that brings you pleasure. So how does that manifest for you and I? Well, it might be that it encourages you subconsciously, to your point, to get up and walk to the fridge. And then as you're walking there, you get that anticipation. You're like, oh, I think I've left a Tim Tam in the fridge. And so then you get this splurge of dopamine. You go, oh yeah, I definitely want that. And so it motivates you to open the fridge door. And then you eat the Tim Tam, and then you get another dousing of dopamine, because you get it's the reward and the pleasure from it.
This is going to be a great advertisement for Tim Tams. People are thinking,
I
need to get my hands on some of these.
And then
So for anyone,
shortly after,
for anyone back home that might be listening, Tim Tam is
it's like a penguin, right?
Yeah, it's a penguin, like a penguin bar. Yeah. But yeah,
I reckon penguins are better, but
it's sort of Tim Tams are idolised over this part of the world.
yeah,
You love your Tim
penguins
Tams.
aren't over there, are they? But they're good. So that the pleasure that you receive, or the pleasure that you receive becomes not one for one. So you can't have the pleasure without the pain. That's just the way that the system's set up. But over time, and it's not one for one in an isolated incident. It's sort of in favour of pain, but over time, if you continually feed that addiction or that pleasure, this seesaw gets really out of whack, and you are in constant craving, you're in constant pain, and you depress dopamine, baseline dopamine.
Yeah.
So all through the day, we're getting surges of tonic dopamine.
Yeah.
So there's a baseline.
Yeah.
If you engage in an addictive behaviour, you know, whether it's Tim Tams, sex, coke, whatever,
All the good stuff.
all the great stuff. Sounds like a great day. You depress the tonic dopamine, so then it's harder to feel the joy in small things, like having a conversation, like the sunrise, pretty flowers, because you're a bit flat. But you can bring that back up by abstaining from the thing that gives you pleasure. But that's
what
easier said than done.
Yeah, so that's why it's so hard for people to cut sugar out of their diets, because of all that kind of background stuff that you've just explained that's in play.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting.
And the motor thing is again, historically the thing that's assisted us as a species. It's the driver for motivation. It puts one foot in front of the other. But in the context of sugar, or you know, in all the guises that it has, what it does is it sends a message, again, sensory and motor message, and that can be putting one foot in front of the other and walking to the fridge and opening the fridge door. But there's also a hand to mouth motor response. So it encourages you to open your mouth, and it encourages you to put that implement, in this day and age it's a fork, into your mouth. So you kind of have this looping relay. It's encouraging you to eat. Whereas if you have a diet higher in things like omega-3, things like protein, then it doesn't follow that same pathway. It's not triggering dopamine, and the motor response is, once we hit a certain constellation of amino acids or the threshold of omega-3, is to close the mouth and put the implement down.
Because we're satisfied, kind of.
100%.
Do you think... it's very interesting talking about how all these things that have served us and have... what's the words I'm looking for? Kind of been the blueprints of how humans are made up, and how it served us back then. But now in modern society, almost the negative effects it has on us. Do you think, you know how you're talking there about you get your dopamine for your Tim Tam? Is that because, you know, back in the hunter-gatherer stages, that people just, when they found their honey or whatever, they got so excited, and they were like...
Yeah, I guess blueprint is a great word, and that blueprint has been built over hundreds of thousands of years, and throw in there a lot of scarcity, a lot of scarcity in the form of famine or drought, and so it's almost like our system is set up to contend with hardship. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I know.
Which is why when your girlfriend goes without breakfast, we're okay, and it actually upregulates things to get us moving to go look for stuff. So we're set up, we've been built on an epoch of evolution that's hinged on scarcity. So then when we do come across that honeypot, or the late summer fruit, or some tubers in the ground, the system is in place to make us fucking pig out and to gorge. Get high calories in the shortest period of time. Eat them quick, eat them now, eat them fast. Like
before the neighbour comes along.
That's the message that we get. Eat as much as you can, as quick as you can. and then move on and do the same.
Yeah.
So it's been a beautiful thing that's served us for hundreds of thousands of years. Maybe not hundreds of thousands of years, but but now in 2021, there's nothing like scarcity.
Yeah.
It's abundance.
Yeah.
And the abundance is predominantly foods that trip that, and it's not coincidence. Like, not to be I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it's no coincidence that manufacturers are producing foods that have a certain profile, and it's that profile that lights that dopamine up like a Christmas tree. So, I might get another packet of those when I go shopping.
Oh, that's it. It's like when you go towards the checkout, it's not fruit and veggies that's lined up along. It's all the good stuff is left there, so that when you're leaving the island where you're going to pay for your petrol, it's all the, like you said, that profile of stuff that's there shouting out at you.
Totally.
So sugar. Sugar is a massive one to get rid of.
Yeah, I think
the diet.
Yeah. What else? I think maybe if you can extend that, so sugar. Just because I don't want people to think, well, I hardly eat a Tim Tam. But sugar is ubiquitous in all, I don't want to say all, but most processed, refined foods.
Like your tomato sauce that you're putting in with your bolognese.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to taste sweet.
Your
so
tomato
it can
ketchup
taste,
and everything.
Yeah, it can taste savoury, like a pizza base, or any condiment. Yeah, barbecue sauce. It does have a sweetness, obviously, but it's not a confectionery item. But it's in all these places, and it trips us up. So I think if I was to say one thing, yes, it would be sugar, but moreover processed food, because sugar is in all those processed foods by and large. So if you start to, and it's not like, I work with clients on this sort of stuff all the time, and it's not like day one I don't want you to eat any processed food, it's all natural from here on in. That's not going to, it has to be a sequential, a stepwise approach that over the course of weeks, months, that you slowly start to shift where you get your nutrients from.
Yeah.
And again, to hammer the point home, even before you're looking at macronutrient split, even before you're looking at counting calories and fasting and feeding windows, if you just do that one thing, and it can be over the course of months, just shift the balance of natural to unnatural, natural to unprocessed, you'll see an increase in vitality, immunity, energy, mood. Like, it's significant stuff.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting how it, of the psychology behind it as well, and how the different stuff, is triggering, like you said, the dopamine and all that kind of stuff.
Well, here's the thing. Like, most people are fairly. Well, I should frame it like this. Like, understanding a healthy diet is pretty easy, right? Lots of good quality protein and fresh fruit and veggies.
Yeah.
We all kind of know that we should do that. So it's not that people don't understand that. They do. It's not rocket science. It's actually very easy to get your head around.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the specifics of keto or paleo, just more natural food than unrefined. So it's not that we can't wrap our head around it conceptually. It's the things like dopamine, it's emotional eating, habits, socializing, all these things that we have to contend with. Like, we might have a trauma in our childhood or anywhere in our life that means that when we are stressed or have anxiety or fearful, we eat. And so you have to dismantle that first. You have to attend to that. If you don't attend to that, eating more veggies might work for a period of time, and then something will come in, a trauma or stress, and fuck the veggies. The veggies don't give me what I need. Give me some ice cream. So you have to manage all that, and it's not to say that you will ever eradicate it, but you have to get to a point where you're aware of it at the very least. If you're aware of it, then there's a crossroads, and you can intercept it if you are resilient enough. So it's actually more the psychology of diet and lifestyle. Understanding that I need to exercise regularly, eat plenty of veggies and good protein, get a bit of sunshine. Fuck, everyone knows that. But it's age-old habit, emotional stress.
And then the stress of life's thrown in on that.
What you were saying about the bandwidth and COVID, I think it's spot on. When we don't have trauma and stress, anxiety in our life, we have all this bandwidth opens up, and we can focus on sleeping well. We can focus on ourselves. We can prioritize us. Then as soon as you throw in relational stress, work stress, financial stress, fucking COVID, then that bandwidth goes and we're not ranked number one anymore, because we have to put out spot fires with work and family, and so our health suffers as a consequence.
And it's so hard to put the blinkers on and shut out all the noise that's around us.
It's impossible.
Well,
not impossible, but
well, it's just about kind of getting the daily habits in, isn't it? And trying to change your mindset towards the more kind of healthy side of things, and doing stuff that you know is going to benefit you.
I think it's important to understand that creating healthy habits, or any health habits, but we're talking about healthy habits, takes time. So anyone sort of embarking on, okay, I want to get fit and healthy, New Year's resolution or something like that, they feel like they have to throw everything at the wall Jan 1. And they have to abide by that.
You're buying the new gym gear, you got the gym membership, everything's
that's all admirable stuff. But you're better off starting, doesn't have to be Jan 1, it could be any day, and just the changes are minuscule. But if you do that minuscule thing, so we can all do something that's minuscule, but if you do that consistently over a long period of time, then it by nature becomes a habit. So it's actually sort of breaking it down so it doesn't become overwhelming. I think that's one of the resistance. People think, fuck, I've got to get a gym membership, I've got to run a marathon. It's like, no, you don't. Just get outside in the morning.
Get out for a walk,
Get up 20 minutes earlier and just, even before you go for a walk, just get some sunlight on your eyes. Get some natural light. That's going to impact your circadian rhythm and inform when you sleep. Like, you don't have to be pounding the pavement or chowing on bowls of kale, because that's not sustainable for most people, for 99.9% of the population. Some people love bowls of kale, some people love running marathons, but most of us don't. So make it suit you, so then it's sustainable. So don't mimic anyone else's diet and lifestyle, because that's redundant. But make the changes small and make them over the course of time, because we're on this planet for a while, so we don't have to rush it. Because if we rush it, we'll fall off the wagon in no time. Think about it as a master plan. So you might have, I've probably got another 4 decades on this planet. You're a young guy, you've probably got 50, 60 years left on this planet. So what's the rush? If it means that you eventually get to a point where you're living a pretty consistently healthy lifestyle, then you've then got another 40 or 50 years to sit in that
reap
space.
the rewards of that.
Reap the rewards, yeah.
And that's it too, is putting, I find this myself, putting all that pressure on yourself
Yeah.
to do things and everything. It's the days then that you don't get up and you don't go for your run. You're like, oh, you useless bastard,
Yeah.
and it's like the negative emotions come with that. And when you're throwing, that's, all the little negative voice kind of starts creeping up again. And then, when that's the voice that takes over, then the guy that's the motivated voice that's there telling you, we want to keep the habits up, that kind of gets overtaken.
Yeah.
So yeah, putting the pressure on yourself,
Yeah.
it can always lead to a bit of a backfire.
Yeah, like it can be very well intentioned. I'm gonna, from next week on, I'm gonna, run 4 days a week, and it's like, hang on a minute, like, do you run at all now? Okay, you don't. Okay, well, let's just start with getting outside the house and going for a walk with a friend or a dog.
Yeah.
Like, let's just, not to say that I don't want to put the dampener on like expectation or goal setting, but I think in my experience, if you make it bite size in a stepwise approach, there's more adherence. You're triggering dopamine more often. Even though there's small things, you're getting that sense of reward. It helps us stay motivated and put one foot in front of the other. So dopamine in this sense, when we got onto exercise somehow, but dopamine in this sense can be a very positive thing. So let's assume that you don't exercise at all. Then you go, okay, today's the day I'm going to go for a walk. Well, then you go for a walk. It's a pleasurable experience. The sun's shining. You had a good chat with your friend. You had a coffee at the end of it. Bang! You get this surge of dopamine. That was really enjoyable. I want to do more of that. So you call up your friend. Let's do that again. And then you kind of need because of the mechanism. You kind of need more of the thing that brought you pleasure. It's like drugs, right? You need more on day 300 than you did on day 1. And so how that works in this instance is that you walk a little bit further, or you walk a bit faster, or you walk more often. And so you're getting more of that positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
So I don't want to demonize dopamine, because without it we wouldn't be here today. But in the context of sugar, it's the thing that trips us up. In the context of exercise, for most populations, it's a motivator and a driver. You can overtrain, obviously, and get addicted to exercise, but
yeah. So we've been bouncing around a bit here. We were talking about kind of the sugar. Is there any other, I suppose, from a nutrition side of things, is there anything that people should try and get more of in their diet and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, it sort of segues into or dovetails into the sugar thing. If they had more protein, so prioritize protein.
Yeah. So
each meal prioritize protein, ideally from ethical sources. That triggers that satiety sensation. So it's very hard to overeat on protein and fat, for that matter. So you don't hear about people that gorge on chicken breasts, but you can gorge on potato chips or ice cream, or because it's a different system. So
you're not going for the chicken fillets when you get the munchies.
No, that's right. So prioritize protein, good quality sources. Then the whole vegetable thing, depending who you're taking sort of advice from, it can be, make sure you're getting 4 cups or 5 cups or 6 cups. Some people are espousing 9 cups. If you're not already a veggie eater, then going from 0 to 9 cups might be a challenge. But I will say is that one of the most important things to consider when you're transitioning to a more natural diet is to make sure that the food tastes delicious, right?
Mm.
Because you're now competing with the Tim Tam.
Mm.
So it needs to be delicious and alluring. So treat your veggies just as you would treat a steak. You know, all about heat management, seasoning, spices, herbs, you know, dressings, whatever it takes to ensure that that bowl of natural and unprocessed food tastes as good as it can taste.
That's where you come in with the
books. Yeah. No, it wasn't a sales pitch, but I think,
well, I wanted to plug it in there.
Right, thanks, mate. Appreciate it. I sort of set you up for that. Because if it's not, you know, we all know that we should eat more veggies. We all know that we should be eating, you know, kale and da 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 da. If you just serve yourself up a bowl of kale, or more importantly, serve your family up a bowl of kale that's not been managed well with heat and seasoned and spiced and squeeze a lemon, blah, 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 they're going to go, fuck's this, Dad. But if you treat it with all those things and maybe incorporate it into a bigger salad, and you dress the whole thing and you know, season well, all of a sudden that thing is bloody tasty. And then you can allure your family in more often, particularly with kids. Like, that carrot has got to taste delicious. They're not going to eat, you know, you and I can eat a carrot because we know that it has health properties, you know. But they don't give a shit about that. They give a shit if it tastes yummy. So I think that's a really important element to it all that we often forget, is that healthy food just needs to be treated in the right way to ensure that you're sitting down and eating healthy food as often as possible. Don't just put loose leaf fucking salad in a bowl and expect people to eat it. You gotta make it taste delicious and look delicious.
Yeah.
Because you're competing with things that manufacturers know the profile of, that sets your dopamine on fire.
Yeah.
So that's what you're competing with. So it has to be delicious. You have to get back in the kitchen.
So yeah, you just got to put your effort into that side of things, of educating yourself on how to do that.
You got to get, by and large, most of us, and I say this with some degree of confidence because I've worked with so many clients, that there's a lot of people that don't cook. And so it's always a challenge then to be healthy, because you're relying on store-bought food, deliveries, takeaways, convenience food, and by and large that family, or those sort of areas of the food landscape is inherently not that healthy. So getting interested in cooking again is pivotal in taking ownership of your own health and becoming the custodian of your own health. And again, this is all about habit forming. So it's not to say person A goes from not cooking to cooking everything by day one. Everything that they eat is made with love and real food in their own kitchen, day one. That's not going to work. So it might be that you go from 100% processed foods and no homemade food day one. And then over the course of 6 months, you shift it so 10% of what you're consuming in any given day is made at home with ingredients that you know and you've bought and they're all natural. And then the next 6 months you shift to 20%. And so over 2 years, 40% of what you consume over any day is made at home with real food.
Yeah.
Another year. Like, again, it's always breaking it down to small bite-sized chunks. Learn a recipe. Get good at it. Master it. Make it your own. And then try something else.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to be Gordon Ramsay within a week or Jamie Oliver within a week.
Yeah.
Create your own. Sure, use a recipe for a reference, but don't. But make it better if you think you can make it better. Like if you want to add more spice or more herbs or less, or less of one thing. And then it becomes inherently yours, and then you don't have to follow a recipe. It's just something that sits in the back pocket. You've always got that. And then expand your range, expand your repertoire. But that is key to becoming the custodian of your health. Yeah, there's probably more of a focus these days on the provenance of food, like where food has come from.
Yeah.
And particularly with meat, and promoting an adherence to ethical sources of meat. Ideally regen, but regen's very emergent in this country. I mean, it's a very old style of land management, but it's fairly novel in terms of a consumer end product.
Yeah.
And we're really at the cutting edge of it all.
Yeah.
Like in years to come, you'll be able to get regen meat just like you can get organic meat.
Yeah.
Or grass-fed meat.
Yeah. Could we talk about that a little bit? Because I know you've just launched your new.
Keep teeing you up, don't I?
Huh? Oh, well, it's awesome. I love everything you're doing.
Oh, thanks, man. So, I guess I've been interested in this space of provenance of food and food sovereignty for, well, even those early books that I wrote. I sort of I give a nod to that we need to give thought about where that food has come from, and animal welfare, and nose to tail. So an animal has died, so let's just not eat the prime cut, let's eat the cheeks and the hooves and the tail. Let's respect the animal. So I've been talking about that for a while, and then 2 years ago I wrote a book called The Sustainable Diet that really unpacked the different food systems that you and I have at our fingertips, and most industrialized countries. So building on my understanding of that and my experience, I've created a meat box that is a monthly meat box that gets delivered to most postcodes in New South Wales at the moment, and beyond in a matter of time. But essentially we take our cattle that has been grown regeneratively, and we butcher that, and I make condiments that you can build into your box. But essentially it's taking regen beef from our farm up north to consumers, because currently it's hard for a consumer to access or find regen meat. You won't find it in Woolies or Coles.
Yeah.
You might find it in Harris Farm, but there's not a Harris Farm in every street corner. So it's at the moment, and what I say we're at the cutting edge is we are at that stage in an industry that it's a fledgling industry. It's not blossomed into a mainstay industry yet, but it will, because that's what people are wanting at the moment.
Yeah.
There's being health conscious is one thing, but there's also this sort of want, need, desire for us to be ethical, and part of that is helping the planet. So the backbone for regen farming is that you're actually giving back to the land. So it's not this constant pull from the land. You're actually regenerating. So it's beyond sustainable farming. It's regenerating the land, regenerating the soil by the guidelines or the methodology of managing cattle. So you're actually using cattle. Your commodity is soil, but you're using cattle to fertilize that soil and turn it over, and in doing so it sequesters carbon, and so potentially we can lower the carbon emissions in the world. So it's funny that for a long time the cow has been demonized, and you could probably say there's some validity to that because it's been managed in a poor way. But if you allow nature to do what nature does best, and you allow mobbing livestock to do what they do. They mob, they mow, they move. So they're constantly keeping grass in a state of photosynthesis. They're constantly trimming the grass and keeping it in a vegetative state. So it's constantly sort of being clipped and wanting to grow. So the only way it can grow is through the sun and taking carbon from the atmosphere and turning it into sugars and putting it into the soil. And it'll stay in the soil until such time that somebody comes along and digs it up. But it'll stay locked in soil, and the carbon-rich soil can hold more water. And so for a country like Australia that's often drought stricken, it sort of ticks that box as well. So it's a win-win. Like the cow gets to herd and mob as it would in nature. It's always on the move as it would in nature, so it's not in feedlots or stalls. It's eating what it naturally eats, i.e., complex mixture of different grasses, and it's it has a happy life. It just has one shitty day, but it's going to die anyway. Let's be honest about it.
And there's no pleasant way of dying in nature. It's not going to be
no.
It's a miserable,
slow,
drawn-out process.
Yeah, they're either being, attacked and eaten by wild dogs or disease, or they get injured, and that's a slow, long death.
Yeah.
And so I understand where people are coming from.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing that's not considered, and I wrote about it in the book, because I was like, okay, well, is veganism the answer?
Yeah.
Because so many people choose to go vegan to promote human health, animal welfare, and the planet. Well, it doesn't negate the fact that sentient beings are dying, because if you're consuming canola oil, soy, wheat, rye, barley, corn, fucking any of those products, you can guarantee, unless you're buying it for some hobby farmist down the road, that it's in a monocrop. So to create a monocrop, and I'm talking about huge swathes of land, kilometers long, of a single species, you would have disrupted habitats. You would have killed ground nesting birds and reptiles and insects, and you would have killed them through pesticides, herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers in the waterways, killing marine life. Like, you're not.
Yeah, there's a big impact on that side of things as well.
Yeah, so it's not like I don't eat meat and so my hands are clean. You will be responsible for the death of animals, and there's been great studies to, this isn't me just saying it. This is based on. There's a great study by Professor Mike Archer, and anyone that's considering vegan or is a vegan, just to run your eyes through it, because it's pretty. It's probably hard to read if you're a vegan, but it doesn't. And again, unless you're growing your own veggies and producing your own oil of any strain of oil, or any pulses or soy or anything of that nature, unless you're growing it your own, you will be responsible for the death of sentient beings. You right, babe? Yeah.
Will you be much longer?
No, I don't think so.
We can wrap it up soon, yeah.
Yeah, I've just got a little bub to look after.
Beautiful, yeah. Do you want to wrap it up soon?
Yeah, sure.
We can wrap it. Thanks a million for coming up chatting to me.
Pleasure, Dylan.
It was great to chat to you. I know we could probably sit here all day and hash out a load more topics.
Yeah.
So where can people find your books?
If not in store, in Booktopia, iTunes probably, Book World. I've got a few. I don't have them all, but any place you can normally find books.
All right. And the Scott Goodman Project as well.
Yes.
They can check you out there.
Yes. So www.scottgoodmanproject.com.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks a million, mate. It was an absolute pleasure to come up and chat to you.
Pleasure. Thanks, Dylan.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening or watching, whatever platform you are joining us on. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and you can take something from it. if you did enjoy it, it would be absolutely amazing if you could spread the word. Maybe tell a friend about the podcast, share it on your social media, and help us spread the message. We're all about spreading tips and information on living a happier and healthier lifestyle. So if we can spread that to a few people and we can leave the world a little bit of a better place than we find it, I think that'd be a successful mission. So thank you very much, and we will see you for the next one.